And now, it is my pleasure to say a few words of introduction before our next two guests come out on stage and join John for their much anticipated conversation. First, let's bring John back out on stage. John. Next, Chris Gorman, would you please join us on stage?
Thank you.
I'm just going to say a few words about Chris as he takes his seat. As the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer at KeyCorp, Chris Gorman brings a corporate perspective to our shared vision of economic empowerment, recognizing the critical role that businesses play in community development and economic inclusion. Under his leadership, Key has been involved in various initiatives aimed at supporting financial literacy and economic mobility because Chris understands that when business invests in their communities, they help create a more robust and resilient local economy. In addition to serving as our presenting sponsor for the evening, Key is United Way's largest workplace campaign with nearly 2,500 employees contributing last year. And I know there's many Key team members here tonight. It's great to see you here with us. Chris, we are so grateful to you and your team for your incredible generosity and partnership in our work. Thank you.
It's great to be here tonight.
And now, Mayor Bibb, would you join us? Mayor Bibb is our 58th mayor of Cleveland, working to improve public safety, invest in neighborhoods, and modernize City Hall. He was born and raised on Cleveland's southeast side in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood. Mayor Bibb has worked in government, business, and the nonprofit sector as an executive and nonprofit leader. Since taking office, Mayor Bibb has successfully brought Cleveland back into the national conversation. For the first time in decades, Cleveland has a leadership role in the U.S. Conference of Mayors, Ohio Mayors Alliance, Climate Mayors, the Democratic Mayors Association, and the Mayors Against Illegal Guns Coalition, all prioritizing state and national advocacy to bring grants and partnerships home to our city. On a personal note, I have known our mayor for some time. I am so grateful for your smart, strategic thought partnership and bold leadership, Mayor. We at United Way share your vision for a Cleveland that works for all. We are here to do our part to make that vision a reality. And now, it is my pleasure to turn it over to you, Mayor Bibb, to continue the conversation.
Thank you so much. United Way, how you doing? It's so great to be with two leaders in business that I admire. John, I wasn't 12 when we met, but over the last 16 years, I've been so inspired by your campaign across the world for financial inclusion. And Chris, we worked together when I was at Key. Great to have you here today. Chris, I want you to reflect on John's remarks this evening and really chime in on what do you think the pathway is for Clevelanders and Americans to financial freedom? And why is your partnership with Operation Hope so important for you as CEO of KeyBank?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's a privilege to be here. It's a privilege to be on the stage with both of you. So what a great talk that was, by the way. I think, look, as you think about advancing, everyone in this room has, people are old, young, black, white, different backgrounds. The one thing everyone in this room has in common is education. And I think if there was one thing that I think we need to really focus on first, it's education. And you can go, as many of you know, I spend a lot of time on Say Yes to Education. And look, the educational system is hardly perfect. Nothing's perfect. We can do a lot better. But one of the things I read this weekend that we as a community, I think, can do a lot about is making sure that our students are in school. And there was an article in the Plain Dealer on Sunday that talked about the truancy rates like 50%. So if you think about the fact that most kids aren't in school, school is only in session every so often, really. And if people are only going half the time, that's something we as a community can do and we can fix that today. Because Mayor, if you were only in the office half the time, you'd be voted out of office.
Yes.
If I was in the office half the time, I'd be fired by my board. John Hope Bryant, if you were only working half the days, you'd be only half as rich as you are now. So I really mean that. I think that's one thing, Mayor, we can do, and I think as a community we should come together and make sure that our students are going to school. And so I think that's really important. The other thing is housing. I think that affordable housing, and I'm really proud of what Key has done in this regard, but it's a huge unmet need, and people need a good place to live so they're not moving around. When it comes to affordable housing, we just inked a deal, Mayor, with your leadership. We're going to together try to raise $100 million. That can make a huge difference. And that's one of the challenges, basically, with kids not being in schools. They're moving around. And if we can we have a great place for everyone to live. I think so those are the two things. And I think they're interrelated: education and affordable housing.
And those are all building blocks to economic prosperity and opportunity in this country. John, I loved your slide because, as former Mayor Bloomberg once said, you can't manage what you can't measure. Data is everything. And that slide hit home for me because I was born and raised in the adjacent zip code in the Mount Pleasant New Miles neighborhood, 44105. And I want to get your perspective on the why. Why do we see lower credit scores in historically redlined Black and brown neighborhoods all across this country? And what's the missing link? And why is it important to have partners like KeyBank to help solve that equation?
Yeah. So trying to truncate this. You have the Homestead Act. Everybody knows 40 acres in a mule. What you don't know is that was actually only 18,000 recipients of 40 acres after slavery. It's 400,000 acres. It was in North Carolina. It was on the beach. And a year after it was given, it was taken back. People don't know that. It was actually retracted by the president that came after Lincoln. So that actually never happened. It happened and then happened. Then you had the Homestead Act, which was 270 million acres. And that was 99%, 98% Caucasian people settling west. That's 10% of all American land. And then you go to 1930, where it wasn't banks that was redlining, it was the government, FHA. I'm not going to repeat everything I just said.
I'll repeat the last thing, FHA.
Yeah. No, what he wants me to repeat is that it wasn't banks redlining. It was the redlining comment comes. The redlining point in history doesn't come from banks redlining. It comes from the federal government redlining. It was the FHA that said that these neighborhoods were unsafe. And they were unsafe because of systemic discrimination, by the way. With the federal government, these neighborhoods are unsafe. They put a red line around it. As a result of that, nobody wanted to insure. The federal government wouldn't provide insurance for mortgage insurance, so then the banks wouldn't lend in areas that had no mortgage insurance. So they went to areas that were yellow and green, which were white neighborhoods. They got the mortgage insurance. They got the mortgages. Well, guess what? Those values went up. So you had literally homes worth 4 times, 5 times, 6 times more in value in the areas where you could get mortgage insurance and a mortgage than an area that the federal government said was redlined. That was 1930. And that went on for a very, very long time. It was up until really the civil rights movement when a lot of those things were reversed. And so you have this systemic embed discrimination and bias that has had a groundwater effect. It goes back from the Civil War. And as far as why today, no one ever gave us a memo on money. That's right. I mean, we're not dumb and we're not stupid. It's what you don't know that you don't know, but you think you know. And no one's ever I get 1 million to 1.5 million viewers, Mr. Mayor, every week on my social media. These are, the data shows that it's young Black men, 18 to 35, looking for a role model, a mentor. And what I do these tests on my social media. Again, 1.5 million views a week. And I'll say things provocative like, you say you hate rich people. No, you don't. You hate rich people till you become rich. And just like that, everybody laughs. Because yes, it's what you hate is a game system. And people feel that the system has been gamed. And what I'm trying to do is to unpack it and repack it with underserved in mind.
Is the solution mandatory financial literacy education, K through 12? Is that the solution?
That is certainly, without question, legislatively mandated and funded to school districts, because school districts are businesses. I mean, I got President Bush and President Obama to sign an executive order making financial literacy federal policy.
Yeah.
But there was no money attached to it, so school districts laughed because they saw it as an unfunded mandate. So school districts have to get compensated to embed this in the curriculum. And then you need, everybody's financially illiterate, including the teachers. So you need the private sector to lean into these communities as role models and volunteers to teach financial literacy, which is a double effect.
And I want to drill down on this and have you respond, Chris. I think one of the major issues we have with this notion of financial literacy and just banking in general is a lot of people don't trust banks. I remember growing up and my grandparents, a lot of them kept a lot of that money underneath that mattress. A lot of them still do. How do we change the trust equation, Chris, from your standpoint, for more communities of color to trust banks, to trust financial institutions so they can be a part of this generational wealth creation?
Well, look, it's a challenge. I think we continue as an industry to make huge progress, but the way you make progress and the way you build trust is you build relationships.
Yeah.
The only way to build trust is to have a relationship. And, part of having a relationship, whether you're in the banking business or you're in any other business, is you have to go to where your potential customers are. And so what we do is we spend a lot of time in church basements, at workplaces, where we try to bring people along, and whether workplace banking, or we spend a lot of time talking about, what does it take to get a mortgage and how do you do it? And then when we have a lot of success, and then what we do internally is every quarter we talk about success stories, and I can tell you about a woman who here in Cleveland that we celebrated the last quarter, where she had a poor credit score. We helped her through all the coaching that we can do, get a higher credit score. We have a $5,000 stipend that we offer that can be used either for a down payment or can be used for any other expenses. And this woman has purchased and owns a home. And she did it, when we first did the math, we thought she'd have to come up with $660. Actually, at the end of the day, she ended up with a $1,700 credit, owns a house, and she's off and running. And so what we do is we go out and we tell stories like that all the time to create the relationships, to create the trust, so that people understand that banks are really there to help. The other thing that, you mentioned, John Hope Bryant, you mentioned in certain neighborhoods with low credit scores, the check cashers, the title lenders. We also have to be very direct as banks in the banking industry at communicating what is going on there that is frankly completely different than what banks do. Payday lending is like factoring receivables. Once you do it once, it's a cycle that no one could break. And so I feel like, you ask what the industry can do better. It's go out, build relationships. These are future customers, and then tell the story, build another future customer. And it's like any other business, you grow it one new customer at a time. We are only as strong as the communities in which we operate. We have 3.5 million customers. We have 17,000 employees. They all come from the communities in which we operate, so it's in all of our interests to bring everybody along.
That's great. John?
I can't underscore one thing he said enough. This is about creating more customers. I'm not asking you for charity. I'm not asking you for handouts. I'm not asking you to go to church, even though you should. I'm asking you, I'm not telling you to be kind to your neighbor. I'm telling you, this is your enlightened self-interest to lift people up at the bottom, because those are your emerging market customers. Those are taxpayers. When you become a homeowner, you're paying taxes. When you pay taxes, you tend to vote. All these things are connected together. Here's two things. He's got something called the Community Reinvestment Act. Every bank in town has a CRA requirement, Community Reinvestment Act. If you take in deposits, you must reinvest in communities. So this is private capital that if you can get the credit score up, they're going to try everything they can to disperse in the communities. Now, you have something called the EITC. You know what this is.
Earned income tax credit.
All right. My guess is that a majority of people in Cleveland make under $65,000 a year.
That's correct.
You make $38,000 a year. You have 3 children. The government owes you about $7,000 cash. All you have to do is file an amendment to your tax return. My people will do that for you. United Way will do that for you. They'll wire the money into your bank account. Get this, you leave here tonight, you call your cousin, everybody here knows somebody making less than $65,000 a year. You call your cousin, you call your friend. Girl, I was at this event tonight. This guy was talking about something like EI, something, TC. You ever heard about that? If that person says no, you come and you call and you thank United Way and the mayor and Chris because you just got that person a check. And get this, if you've never filed, it's retroactive for 3 years.
Wow.
So you made $38,000 a year, you get a $7,000 check, times 3, that's almost $20,000. That's your down payment for your home. That's the down payment, that's your startup capital for your business. That is what you need, your credit score up, your debt down, your savings up, so you can qualify at midnight. When you go to the computer, it doesn't ask you what color you are, it wants to know what your credit score is. And he'll give you the capital, now you got the down payment, now you can create a whole new generation of stakeholders in Cleveland.
That's great, that's great, that's great. But before you wrap up, I want to just end with a few more questions. One, this is a nonpartisan message, but early voting started yesterday. We know the economy is top of mind for voters all across the state and all across the country, and especially here in Cleveland. Chris and John, if President Trump or President Harris calls you the day after the election and wants your counsel on 1 to 2 things we need to do to close the racial wealth gap in this country, what would be your advice? Chris?
So the first thing I would talk about is financial literacy, because there is a huge, there really is not an earnings gap. We do a bunch of analysis on this. There clearly is a wealth gap, and the difference is, I think, people really taking a long-term perspective, and that's one of the things we like so much about Hope Inside, because you basically lay out a roadmap. And one of the principal elements of that is just knowing how to plan, and the other is just delayed gratification. But part of delayed gratification is you have to have a game plan.
Yeah.
And so I would be a huge promoter of financial literacy. And the other thing that I mentioned earlier tonight is making sure that we're doing not only financial literacy, but just education broadly, making sure our kids are in school. Those are the 2 things I would focus on. And they're both very doable, by the way.
Absolutely. John?
Financial literacy, bipartisan legislation starting in the Senate. I think you can get 80 U.S. senators from both Republican and Democratic parties. Already got a few senators willing to tee it up to have bipartisan legislation, because America is exhausted with division. Mm-hmm. We're exhausted. We can find something we can agree on. Yes, we're exhausted. Financial literacy is not complicated, it's not controversial. Get the Senate to get 80 votes from both houses, both parties, to agree on it, embedded in, get the House to pass it, get the President to sign it, and get civil rights and civil rights at the White House to stand behind this legislation, make it the civil rights issue of this generation. We've already talked about what that should include from K to college, but also it should include a bank account for every child at birth. A bank account at birth. It should be part of your Social Security, your Social Security account, and a bank account at birth. You live in a free enterprise democracy. And then you should tie that tie the earned income tax credit as a embedded right. You shouldn't have to have a tax pro to get it. It should be a bonus for middle class people who are working. Wall Street gets a bonus, Mainstream should get a bonus. It's not a handout, it's a hand up. The third thing, and that bank account should be used, by the way, to seed into the into Wall Street, into an index investment account, so that kids can see that you build wealth in your sleep. You make money during the day, you build wealth in your sleep. This is going to keep kids in school because now you plug the socket in the wall, connect education with aspiration. Now kids know why they're going to school, and they can dream big dreams so they can grow up to be rich like Chris. And then the last thing should be a tax plan where the private sector is incentivized through a tax write-off and a tax benefit to hire interns at the urban level, at the rural level. I call it inclusive economics. So internships, apprenticeships, what did I call it? Farm clubbing. Get a tax plan that incentivizes the rebuilding the ladder from the bottom up. And we need to train an entire generation of us for AI. Artificial intelligence is going to be the biggest game changer in your entire life. We went from the horse and buggy to the automobile from 1850 to 1910. We're going to go from labor as a driver to technology-driven technology with labor overseeing it in the next 5 years. AI is going to absolutely change everything, and we need to retrain an entire generation of Americans to control the new horse, don't become the horse, because after the 20th century was over, the most valuable thing for a horse was glue. And I'm not joking, it was in 1910. Human beings, you make money during the day, you build wealth in your sleep. Use your intellect to build wealth. Use your intellect to have a higher idea and a higher job aspiration through skilled opportunity. This whole game is going to change with technology, and there's no reason why Cleveland, as an example, can't be an epicenter for all that's going on in the changes in finance, real estate, healthcare, and technology. Before we wrap up, one final piece of advice for the audience in the room tonight. Do something. I don't really care what you do. Just do something. PhDs are good and PhDs are better. And the church said, the world's not going to remember you based on what you got. The world's going to remember you based on what you give. And don't be afraid of the future. 1 out of 7 jobs in Ohio is an agricultural job. But your GDP is only 3% agriculture. Think about that. 1 out of 7 jobs in Ohio is an agricultural job. But 3% of your GDP comes from agriculture. That's looking backwards, not looking forwards. Look at where the economy's going. Look at where you're going. Don't be afraid of the future. You cannot have an America without Ohio. Amen. Or Cleveland. Or Cleveland. I was going there. And just remember, I love you. We are each other's brothers and sisters. I don't know you, but I love you. Chris?
Amen. This is totally doable. There's a few levers that we can pull that can make a huge difference. We have incredible resources to work with here in Cleveland. It's been a privilege to be with both of you this afternoon. Both of you are part of the great part of what we can do, so thank you.
You should know, by the way, when I travel the country, he is a rock star. Oh, thank you. People think he is amazing. I'm serious. Other mayors sending me notes about Mayor Bibb. You should realize that you have a real gift here. And you have a gift also called the City of Cleveland. I love you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.